Hello and welcome. Ukraine and Russia, both of them are willing and do intend to fight to win. There is currently no real room for negotiations, and in this video we'll talk about it as well as about the developments along the front line. In an interview with the Russian television, Putin emphasized that the West and Ukraine cannot keep up with the production needs for Ukraine. He says Russia instead has huge capacities for military goods. It'll produce 1,600 tanks in 2023 alone and is still expanding its capacities. Western attempts to deploy units, to send weaponry to Ukraine are just an attempt to extend the war. There is no chance of the West winning. He claims that should the West intend to increase its production, that this would only be possible by severe civilian costs, which is utter nonsense if we regard the discrepancy in the production capacity and in the economic strength of the West in comparison towards Russia. In his whole emphasizing how Russia can keep up with the needs, how Russia can extend its military, how Russia can deploy and mobilize men and material, Putin clearly shows that he has no intention to give in to any negotiated settlement, because he's still willing and he thinks he's still capable of militarily winning this conflict. Ukraine, on the other hand, has some different plans, but we'll talk about them a little bit later. Let's first start with the developments along the front line. We have reports of Russian attacks at Ryanikivka, and in this area and at Snikivka both have failed. There is one Russian small territorial gain reported in Kovalivka, which, let me just check here, is here in Kovalivka. Their geolocated pictures have shown a small extension of the Russian control. Other than that, there is a failed attack in the direction, there were failed attacks in the direction of Makivka, Neveske and Termi. Termi here and here. So basically along that front line here, the Russians were pushing west without achieving anything. Also, attacks around Crimea are continuing. Failed attack at Dibrova and failed attacks here in the forests are being reported. South of Seversky Donetsk, we have continued reports about fighting at Bilohorivka and Spirne. No reports of Russian successes in this regard. Also, attacks are going in the direction of Vimka, which is here. So attacks are going in this direction here as well. There's reports about continued fighting at Orikhovo-Vasilivka, which is here. Some Russians claim that they've gained some ground, but I cannot verify this. I have not seen any verification of territorial gains. Inside of Bakhmut itself, the Russians are claiming that they extended their control in the north. In particular, they claim that the Azom Industrial Works is now fully under Russian control. There are some confirmation of Russian successes in the south, though. There's even a geolocated picture of Russian corpses across the T0504. But the thing is, later a video that is at least supposedly happening later is passing that area without being shot at. So it seems that the Russians might have in between advanced there, but their attack has been defeated and they were repulsed and being pushed back. So generally, though, while I cannot confirm the exact location of every Russian unit here, we can confirm that the Russians are really slowly advancing within Bakhmut, but they are advancing, they are slowly gaining ground in the city itself. The lines of communication seem to be more or less open still. The several routes are still possible to be used. There are videos of cars driving into the city. All of it is in artillery range, but the actual fire control, so a direct line of sight to shoot, for instance, with ATGMs, etc., is not really confirmed. And we even have pictures of cars still driving around that northern route here, even though in latest pictures, the number of car wrecks has visibly increased in that area. Stepove is, when we go to the area of Avdiivka here, Stepove is still under Ukrainian control. Some Russians claim that the fighting has reached the outskirts, though, so that would be more or less this area here. This I cannot really confirm. We have reports of Russian attacks in the direction of Keramik, so up here, Novokalynove, in the direction of Stepove, in the direction of Avdiivka itself, in the direction of Siverne and Tonenske, and in the direction of Pervomayske. I cannot confirm any successes in those areas whatsoever, but at least the reports are the Russian contacts are continuing. There's also fighting reported around Marinka. I cannot confirm any changes in territory here. Neither can I do that about Vuleda or Novomikhailivka, where the Russians have attacked as well. On the southern front, the Ukrainians are saying the Russians did a huge troop redeployment. So they rotated troops out and then back in, other units in. That led to the false claim that was going through the internet a couple of days ago that the Russians have evacuated Nova Kakhovka, which is here. Actually, the Ukrainian General Staff itself said so, even though it didn't take them long to correct themselves. That was in concert of a bigger troop rotation, which now seems to be more or less over. Other than that, no significant changes on the southern front line. Obviously, artillery fire is continuing, and there are reports of commando activity, especially on the islands here, but nothing that changes even tactically. I cannot even confirm tactical changes along the front line here. Generally, we have now the Deputy Defense Minister of Ukraine, Hanna Maliar, is now demanding an information blockade about a coming Ukrainian counteroffensive. So she's saying the talk about it should stop to allow for a tactical surprise at the very least, if not an operational surprise. We will see how far that is going to be successful and how it's going to continue. There are reports that in Berdyansk on 1st of April, there will Ukrainians living there, or generally civilians living there, will need papers to be allowed to move around. That is new there, and there are some indications that it might be introduced in all of Zaporizhzhia, which is this region here, this oblast that is occupied, the part of the oblast, of course, that is occupied. The clear indication in this regard would be that Russia wants to limit the movement of civilians, likely in anticipation of a Ukrainian counteroffensive, as moving civilians could give information about Russian troop positions. It could give information. It could actually lead to partisans attacks, etc. in this regard. So by limiting the legality of moving around in this area, the Russians will have an easier time controlling the civilian population, which seems to be in concert with the Russian expectation of a coming Ukrainian counteroffensive in southern Zaporizhzhia. Colonel Serhiy Cherevati of the Eastern Command of Ukraine has said that it's too early to put the reduced attacks in Bakhmut and to put them in an overall picture, basically. So I've reported in past situation report that the Russian attacks that are being reported about around Bakhmut are getting lower and lower. The attack intensity seems to be diminishing. Whether this already means that the whole offensive there is culminating or not is too early to say, especially, and there Colonel Serhiy Cherevati said it has to be mentioned that conventional Russian forces are now supplying and adding up to the strength of Wagner in the region, which is more or less depleted. So while Wagner itself might be culminating, that doesn't mean that the attacks cannot gain in intensity again, even though Ukraine is currently saying the situation in Bakhmut has stabilized. On the Crimea, we have some interesting pictures about wait, it's the wrong thing here. Okay. On the Crimea, we have pictures now of supposedly positions that are being established at the Kerch Bridge. Now, this is one of the prefabricated bunkers we've seen a couple of times in the past. It's being set up here, and here we clearly see a dugout, likely a machine gun position that is looking out on the water, which would indicate that the Russians actually see a slight possibility of a Ukrainian amphibious operation in this region here. Obviously, that would demand Ukrainians having reached the Azov Sea, but then going doing a command raid on the Kerch Bridge to blow it up would be well within the realm of possibility and probably absolutely worth the risk because should they reach the Azov Sea and should they then be able to blow up the Kerch Bridge, completely destroy it for good this time, then Crimea and southern Kherson should more or less be a ripe fruit for the taking. There's been partisan activity in Mariupol. Here we have a video of a car being damaged at a IED attack. We have a picture here of the car being damaged as well. It's in Mariupol. The target was the police chief of Mariupol, a turncoat, a traitor that was set up by the Russians. We have information about the mood within the Ukrainian population. According to that survey, and from what I found, it seems to be more or less legit. So I could not find that this survey institute is known for propaganda, even though I cannot fully confirm it, because obviously in a survey like this, it is important that the data is actually more or less accurate. But from what I found, it seems to be accurate. Here, though, 82% of Ukrainians are still in favor of joining NATO. Zelensky still has a 91% support inside of the Ukrainian population. 97% of the people asked believe that Ukraine will be victorious, and 74% believe Ukraine will manage to recover its former borders. This shows that if 74% believe that Ukraine will regain control over its international borders, that the limit for negotiations, the wiggle room for negotiations for the Ukrainian government is fairly slim. Should Zelensky now make some kind of peace while close to 100% believe in victory, while 3/4 of the population believe that the victory will be more or less total, including the complete reconquest of Crimea, that would be political suicide and would probably put him in the crosshairs of nationalists that would seek revenge for such a treacherous peace. That again, a sign that Ukraine is far from being willing to accept any territorial losses, as it is still believing that it can win this war. And for that, obviously, we will talk about the support that is coming later in the situation report, and we will expect to see Ukrainian counteroffensives in the future, but this is not the point of it yet. We have some news from Prigozhin, though. He is accusing the Russian government trying to diminish Wagner's role and basically delete them from the history books. He said that the Russian national television RT was forced to delete half of a movie about prisoners, about convicts fighting in Ukraine. According to that, the part that was cut would have been the part that showed Wagner personnel. And he himself, when talking about those criminals, said that 5,000 have been released by now with a full pardon, and of those only 0.3% had a re-offense chance within the first months, which supposedly it's much lower than among usual criminals that are being released from prison in Russia. This is obviously just coming from him, so we have no confirmation of those numbers, but at least some numbers at all whatsoever. When it comes to the international support, we now have confirmed that Pakistani 122 millimeter rockets for the BM-21 Grad, basically the small caliber multiple launch rocket system that Ukraine is operating as well as Russia, have arrived, and those are Pakistani ones. So more Pakistani weaponry is confirmed in Ukraine. The likelihood of that is simply Pakistan being so cash strapped that they are willing to sell military goods to be handed over to Ukraine for hard cash. And there are various rumors that the US is buying a lot of Soviet-style ammunition within Pakistan to then hand it over to Ukraine. We also had past reports that Pakistan supposedly is going to give up some of its T-80s that were produced by Ukraine to give it to Ukraine, but there are no confirmations whatsoever in this regard yet, and all those rumors were more or less started on the internet without any real sources. But we do see some activity within Ukraine itself as well. When it comes to an unmanned ground vehicle here, we clearly see that this is, it has an RPG-7 launcher, so for shoulder-fired anti-tank weapon. that can also have high explosive warheads, and it has a huge variety of different warheads for different uses. And at the same time, there's a machine gun established on it as well. Interesting too that we see it operating apparently seemingly in coordination with a drone, even though that drone might just be to take pictures for the video. But interesting, they demonstrate a couple of uses for this here, and also very interesting that supposedly you can see it going here into a building. So for fighting, urban fighting, this supposedly going to be useful as well, while not putting Ukrainian lives at risk. There is a report now. The German government has confirmed the 18 Leopard 2A6 that were promised to Ukraine have already been delivered. They are in Ukraine now, and we have this picture here also from Ukraine showing various Western equipment, most prominently here the British Challenger 2 and the German Marder in Ukraine, within units that are stood up and are planned to be used in the future. Also, we have an interesting video here. Highly interesting because it shows the M113, which is famous for its aluminum armor, which didn't have the greatest reputation. But it shows here that just because it's not steel and aluminum doesn't mean it's like butter. It's like what you used to from aluminum foil. We see a variety of hits on it. A lot of it, some of it seem to be splinters, like this might be splinters, but a lot of them seem to be bullet hits as well, at least when it comes to my limited knowledge of how fragment hits, etc. look like. And according to this, the majority, or basically, or maybe even all of those hits have been stopped by the armament. So even those old more or less obsolete APCs do their job here and still do it fairly well. Just see that it's emphasizing that it's artillery too. Okay, so other than that, we have an interesting video here which shows the usage of Ukrainian Mi-8 helicopters that are shooting unguided S-8 rockets in a ballistic arc upwards towards the front line. And here we see the effect of it, basically looking like a BM-21 Grad artillery salvo, rocket salvo. So if it manages to hit, we see how it looks on, or if they manage to aim properly, which is obviously extremely difficult, this is how it's going to look like on the receiving end. I also have an interesting video here, more or less funny video. Putin is meeting with an aide, and here we can see how he is giving permission to come closer. So apparently it is in coordination with how far you're allowed to go, and there he winks, he shows the hand sign, come a little closer, now stop. So he insists on keeping his distance, which then obviously is firing up the rumors that in Mariupol, that wasn't even Putin, but some kind of body double that was there. It's a discussion I more or less refrain from joining because I don't judge my abilities to identify similarities between persons well enough. I simply believe that it's not my competence to understand whether that's someone real or not. I don't want to join a discussion where I don't feel I can add anything at all. Here is those supposedly are also already showing Marders in Ukraine. Now, obviously, with this picture, we have the confirmation that they're already in here, and we see Ukrainian troops using Marders in the woods somewhere, getting ready. And finally, we have a video here. Maybe you've seen that combat video of from inside Ukraine of a Ukrainian soldiers basically fighting more or less on his own. There is a comrade in a dugout next to him, in a shelter next to him, who is more or less just handing him weapons while one of them is fighting on its own. I can't show you the video because you see from very close up how he shoots and kills a Russian soldier. But now the report is that he has been awarded and thanked, and you see Salushny here, the head of the Ukrainian armed forces. That was it already from me for now. If you enjoy what I did, I would very much appreciate a thumbs up. Leave a comment for the algorithm and what do you think how this war will end. Maybe some interesting discussions may start, and maybe there are some new viewpoints popping up here. It also really helps with the algorithm. If you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. And this channel is only possible because of the support from viewers like you. If you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. Thank you very much to everyone already supporting the channel. That's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.